Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Perry Zagliaco of Moonlight Conversations. It's not exactly moonlight right now, but I decided to do this interview here during the day because we have a very special guest on my show today. You may recognize this name here, DEBORAH Presley Brando. Okay, this is the book she wrote here. DEBORAH Presley. She's the daughter of Elvis Presley, believe it or not. She married Christian Brando, the son of Marlon Brando, the famous actor. And she wrote a book here, of course, as you can see, Memoirs of a Starchild. So let's right away bring on Debbie. They can call you Debbie, right? Deborah, Debbie. Deborah, it's good to see you. Looks like you're dressed for the ranch, so to speak.
Yes, thank you.
How's everything going today?
Very well,
How's a beautiful California afternoon here?
It is.
Right, okay. Well, anyway, let's talk about your book. And how long ago did this book was released?
I think it was January of this year.
This year?
I think so.
I see. Yeah, because when someone informed me about this was the title itself caught my attention. Memoirs of a Starchild. So can you just briefly explain what that title means?
Okay, starseed, astrologically, a lot of us feel like we don't really belong here, and that actually came from one of my father's beliefs. I believe that we, come from, God is our father, and this isn't our first time around, and the starseed are just people like me who have a fascination with the stars and astrology, and believe that we didn't begin and end here.
That's great. Yeah, it's a very interesting title. I think it should. I think that
but
title.
Some people
itself,
think that that's something like vulgar and weird. It has nothing to do with what some people go to immediately. It's more of an enlightened belief system. It's not.
I see.
What it looks like, because people have asked me about that.
Yeah. So we're going to get into the situation here that you are actually have been proclaimed the daughter of the late great king of rock and roll Elvis Presley. Mm-hmm. Let's see. I'm looking for that resemblance right there. You think? It does. Yeah, you do have some of that resemblance.
Before he had his nose fixed.
Right.
I'm 40 years older than he ever saw.
Yeah.
So.
It's strange when people ask my age these days. I say, okay, I was born July 19th, 1956. That makes me a rock and roll baby.
That's right.
They laugh at me and say, what do you mean rock and roll baby? I said, I was born 2 months before Elvis made his debut on Ed Sullivan's show. That's why.
That's right.
So I guess we both grew up with Elvis.
I was conceived in June of '55, which is just on the edge of when he was,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit about your mother, who I think you love so much and admired so much. And how did your mother actually get involved with Elvis? Now, what I read, that Elvis went to a recording studio in North Carolina. What was the name of the town in North Carolina?
Charlotte.
It was Charlotte.
And it was called Howard Simpson Studio. And they were good friends with a man named Bill Trader, who wrote a song called A Fool Such as I. That was recorded before,
remember that song.
Before he recorded it again.
Right.
But my mother lived 3 doors down, and she hung around with the children of the owner, and it was a photography studio too. And so she was the only child, so she was there a lot, and that's where she learned love singing. And one day he came in with his cousin Gene Smith, and he was just doing background jingles for the electrical company and for a donut. It was just, I wish we could find those.
Yeah, he's well. You mentioned him quite a bit in the book, Gene Smith. Now he's Elvis's second cousin?
First cousin? They're first cousins. They moved from Tupelo to Memphis together as a family, and my father had a sleeping disorder, and he would get up and go walking. Wow, it's loud, in the middle of the night. And so my grandmother wanted Gene to be with him all the time, just to keep him from getting up and wandering away. So Gene was literally with him Gene was 6 weeks older, so they were like brothers.
Right. Gene comes from Gladys.
Side, yes.
This Gladys, Elvis's mother.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Smith
I see.
side.
I've been trying to trace this lineage through your book here.
I actually prefer my Smith blood on my grandmother's side because in Tupelo, the Presleys were known as being good-looking and lazy.
Oh, okay.
And tall. So, but the Smith side to me is just more nurturing and more intuitive. And I mean, I shouldn't pick sides, but that's the side I feel closest to.
I see. Well, that's great. And now, did your mother as you were growing up, let's say by the time you were in elementary school or middle school, as we call it, did she even slightly mention that you were Elvis's daughter?
She never mentioned I was his daughter, but she mentioned him all the time because
Yeah.
I knew she knew him before he was famous. He was almost like a family member as far as hearing her talk about him all the time and how she knew him before he was famous. But when you're a child, you don't know what fame means. I just thought everybody knew him, and I didn't think about fame in terms of what it is until I was much older. But he was always a part of my life, and I remember being with him when I was really small, up until I was about 4 and able to talk. But I remember him picking me up and holding me and having my head in his neck and us being separated, and I have memories of him. So I didn't think of any, and I still to this day don't see him as a famous person. I just see him as a humble, kind man that loved his mother and his country and my mother, and just a loving human.
Yeah. Well, I was actually stationed myself over in Europe where Elvis had been stationed. Well, I was down in the southern part of Europe in Italy, but I did medical evacuations to Germany.
Oh, wow.
The U.S. Air Force base in Wiesbaden
yeah.
and Mannheim. Elvis was stationed in Mannheim,
Yeah.
right there, the Army base, and they have these monuments all over to Elvis
Wow.
there. You know,
All over the world, yeah.
Yeah, but
funny.
especially there, Elvis was once stationed here.
In 58.
You know, yeah, exactly, and that's what he was originally drafted.
Yeah,
You know,
it's true.
You know, you had this little meeting with the colonel once,
Yes,
didn't you,
I
at the
did,
airport
I
one
did.
time? Can you just briefly touch upon that meeting there?
I was 21. I didn't really understand the purpose because my aunt said to me, "You're going to go see Elvis," and I'm like, really? I was just a 21-year-old mother of 2, Mormon, you know, and I just usually went to church and didn't go many places. And I thought, how weird. And she said, we're going to a private airport. And I didn't know there was such thing as a private airport. So I went, and later I realized that it had been planned. But I was sitting at a table by myself just wanting to go home because I thought how weird, all these women are like pressed up against the glass waiting on his plane to come in the middle of the night. And the colonel just came over and introduced himself and sat down and talked to me for about an hour. I think he was trying to find out if I had figured it out yet.
Oh.
And also he was there that night because a book that was written by the bodyguards had found its way through Larry Geller to my father, the book he wrote called What Happened, about his life. And he was very upset, so the colonel came to calm him, to keep him calm. And the colonel said to me, yeah, I travel a day ahead of the boy. I don't usually see the boy. And he said, I just go to the venues and get the money. But tonight, you know, I'm here because he needs me. And I didn't put it all together for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I remember reading the newspaper accounts when the colonel died. In these interviews, they asked him, did you really love Elvis? During this, he said, sure, I love the boy. He said the same thing. Sure, I love the boy.
He did.
You know, it's like,
and I was very close to Greg McDonald, who was raised by the colonel, and he went on to manage Ricky Nelson. Greg McDonald, he has a book out, actually, about the colonel. And they had a very powerful relationship, and they've needed each other. I mean, the colonel didn't need him as much because he was a millionaire at the time he met him. He had been with Eddie Arnold and Hank Snow and had retired, and had just recently had a heart attack. But then he heard from Mae Axton and also from the woman who played Minnie Pearl, I forget her real name, that there was a boy that he had to see in Louisiana. You have to see this boy. So he went to see him, and the rest was history. But there was a strong love between them.
I see. So, actually, let's jump a little forward now. Your mother finally revealed to you the secret on the day your father, Elvis, died.
Yeah.
That day.
Yeah.
He said that you are...
Yeah.
Did she say... How did she say it? That you are the daughter, or secret daughter, or what kind of terminology did she use here?
I had it's a good question. I had confronted her in April because I'd put it together.
Yeah.
A boyfriend of mine had said, you know, you want to know, because I knew the man who raised me wasn't. And I was on a mission, and it didn't matter to me who it was. I just wanted to know. But I had confronted her in April, and she had just had gallbladder surgery, and she just burst into tears. There was a magazine laying, and I said, can I ask you a question? She said, yeah. I said, this is my father. And she just burst into tears, and she had just had surgery, and I was not expecting that. So I let it go for a while. And then she was Mormon, and she was getting her divorce, and she didn't want to talk about it till she got her divorce from the man who raised me after 21 years. And I was waiting for her to come over, and her divorce was final. She had the divorce papers in the car, and she was coming to tell me. And she said that they were both going to talk to me, that he was coming to Asheville. And I heard it on the radio while she was on her way, and there was no cell phones then, and it came on the radio, and it just flooded the house, and I just felt like I couldn't believe it, because the last thing I ever thought was that he would die. And so I usually ran out to meet her in the long winding driveway in Carolina, and I was frozen. I just stood at the front door, and I'll never forget, she came walking up, and I was just kind of frozen, and she got to the door, and I said, "Mama, can you tell me now he's dead?" And it was all, his music was playing, and it was just too much. And she took her hands and she put them on my shoulders like this, and she looked me straight in the eye, and she said, "Yes, Deborah, it's true. He is your father, and you have to promise me one thing." And I said, "What is that?" And she said, "That you'll never do anything to bring shame to his name." So, and then I remember just falling to the floor, and I just started beating my head on the wooden floor, because it felt better to beat my head against the floor.
I read that. Yeah.
And so she stuck her hand between my head and the floor. And I later found out from Jean that when my grandmother died, after the funeral, Jean and my father took a train back and went to the Roosevelt. And there was a Louis XIV wooden bed, and he did the same thing. He was just beating his head against the headboard of the bed, because it's such a visceral pain that that was my only reaction. And for 3 days she held me, and I was in bed, and she brushed my hair, she'd help me, with my bath. And after about 3 days, I just realized it was a gift, but I gained and lost a father in 1 day. Sorry, I'm so emotional.
Yeah, that's so fun. You want to calm down?
No, I'm calm. I just probably need a makeup person. Anyway, no, but that's what happened with that.
Now, I did read in the book that this one husband of yours, the hairdresser, Joey.
Oh boy, yeah, him.
Well, I'll just brief on it if you don't want to. But he was the one that went to the press.
Well, because I didn't even.
He exposed you, and he made you very upset, I know.
I didn't even know how the press worked. I just thought magazines showed up at the store, and I was really naive. And we were at Ronnie James Dio's one night, and he was doing Ronnie's hair. It was I don't know if people know who he is anymore, but he was a famous singer. And when we left Ronnie's, because he was doing his hair, we went up to Mulholland, and we stopped, and I could see all the lights of the valley. And my husband looked down there, and he said, every single one of those lights knows who your father is. He said, they would probably want to know about you too. And I'm thinking, they do all know who he is, but I don't know about the me part.
Yeah.
And so the next thing I knew, and he didn't do it to be mean, I guess. But
you consider in the book, it's kind of like you considered it a real betrayal.
It was, because he came back to me, and he did famous people's hair all the time, so he understood that world more than I did. And he came back in one day, and he goes, here's a check for $10,000. You're going to be all over the world. I just sold your story to the tabloid.
Oh.
And then the next thing I knew, he said, they're sending a photographer. So the photographer came over, and this is how naive I was. The photographer took my pictures, and he said, they're going to be in Japan in the morning. And I thought, how are you going to fly to Japan? But I didn't even know what a fax was. He said, we're going to fax them over. And I'm like, I didn't know what a fax was. So I was not the smartest tool in the shed, being Southern and just out here newly.
Right. So we move on to Christian this time. Now you met Christian through your friend Nan Robinson. She was an agent.
His picture. She was a manager for Harry Wilson. She was a manager.
Okay. And you met Christian through her.
Right. I saw a picture of him on her wall, and she had she was a manager, so she had a lot of people like Susan Hubley and Troy Donahue. Right. And then there was a picture of a man, and he didn't have a name. And I just saw it, and all of a sudden, when I saw his face, it's like everything stopped in the world. And Jean was on the phone. She had just connected me with Jean. And so I just said, who was that? And then she didn't answer me. And then when I was leaving, after I talked to Jean for the first time, she yelled out the window. I was getting in my car, and she goes, "Oh, by the way, that's Marlon Brando's son." Yeah. Because I had told her, I saw the picture, and I said, I'm going to marry him someday. And it's like, what? And then she said, "That's Marlon Brando's son." And I'm like, oh, shit. It's not going to go well. But
one of his, 4 or 5 children?
10 or 11.
10, yeah. The ones we don't know about.
He's got 3 with the housekeeper. Yeah. Which I was very close to.
Well, he married his co-star in A Mutiny of the Bounty. That was one wife he had there. Yeah. The lady from Tahiti.
Yeah.
So he had some Tahitian
he married
siblings.
Anna, Christian's mother too, who's an actress.
Yeah. Well, I read that part. It was you two were married in Vegas. Was it Vegas there? Late night.
Right.
One night got married. They had to call the minister in for out of bed or something.
Yeah.
Like
Well, we had to go back to the courthouse because the court clerks were so infatuated with Christian that they put that I was the bride and no, he was the bride and I was the groom. So we had to go back and get another license because they mixed us up, and he thought that was funny. He said she does wear the pants, and I'm thinking.
And it's so a shame that what happened with Christian, that he took the blame for his sister.
He did.
Yeah, that was tragic in a way. Why he would have gone to jail for his sister, because she's the one I think that actually shot him.
She did.
Yeah.
But she didn't mean to. According to Christian, she thought the safety was on, and she was just,
Yeah.
But she didn't. It was an accident, and he did it not only for his sister, but he did it for his father, because he really wanted his father's approval. And his father said, "Look, your sister's 8 months pregnant. She's schizophrenic. She hasn't been on her medication, and you need to take the blame."
And Dag DeLay was suspecting of assaulting her.
Yeah. But we don't know
even
that.
when she was pregnant.
He said she showed him places where he had kicked her on her stomach, but I don't know. But he was being protective, and he'd be a hero anywhere else. But his dad didn't get him off. I mean, like I said, I talked to the detective that arrested him, and he said it was so obvious when they got to the house. It wasn't true. Christian was in one room, Cheyenne in another. After 20 minutes of Marlon entertaining the detectives and waiting 4 hours to call, and Dag had a cigarette in one hand and a remote in the other, and they covered him up his feet. And all of a sudden, Christian walked out like it was timed and said, "I confess, I did it." And I said, "Why did you take him if you knew he didn't do it?" He said, "Once someone makes a confession, that's all there is to it."
Oh.
And he's the officer that took the mugshot, which is now at the police
museum up there.
Yeah, because my daughter was texting me about 3 years ago. She goes, "Mom, I'm on this tour of the police museum, and this detective is saying that Christian is innocent." And all of her life, people have said, "Why did you marry a killer?" And I always told her he didn't do it. So that was confirmation, because she heard right there, him not knowing she was in the audience. So God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. Well, I can feel Christian's situation. He's he's a sibling or a offspring of a famous person. And a lot of them feel they can't measure up to their parents' success.
That's true.
So he became a welder. Christian, right?
Yeah, but that's interesting too, because Christian had a natural ability to act. Both of his parents were actors, and he was offered a $250,000 contract in Hollywood, and he did make movies in Italy, and his father just said, "No, you're not going to act in this town." His father forbade it because he was jealous and insecure. Marlon was basically had his own issues from his childhood too, and that broke Christian's heart. So he became a welder and a tree trimmer. But he was a great artist. But he could do Marlon impressions better than Marlon. We would go out and he would entertain people. But Marlon was just his ego was not going to let him.
Did he ever do a Godfather impression?
Oh yeah.
That would be funny.
He did. He's so funny, and he would drive Marlon crazy doing it. And because Marlon didn't even want to make The Godfather, he thought it was too violent.
Yeah,
but he needed money.
Yeah. So we can just go back to your struggle to prove that you were the daughter of Elvis. Was it the Tennessee Court of Appeals?
Yeah, they threw out the original order because the judge who found that I wasn't my father's, it was his last day on the bench. He didn't even look at me. He slammed down the gavel and said that I had no merit, and that I was not and could not be, and so that went all over the world. And then I went to the Court of Appeals, and they vacated that order and said that I am, but I have no inheritable rights because I was born out of wedlock. Therefore, I'm not lawful.
Yeah, and Priscilla was saying the same thing about it, and then she had a comment about that she will only deal with Elvis's children that were born in wedlock,
which is her. So that all served her. But now there's a new law. This is brand new information, starting in I think '96 in Tennessee, where they say illegitimate children are just as lawful. So I may go back to court with that someday, and maybe not. But
Yeah, and your struggle with Lisa Marie too. Lisa Marie.
Well, she just was influenced by her mom. She was raised a Scientologist. She wasn't raised a Christian, and that's what my father was. That's what I am. That's what we are for generations back. And she was raised in a whole different world in Scientology, where they don't put God first. I mean, no offense, I have good friends that are Scientologists, but and she just, she called me on the phone one day after I'd been trying to reach her and simply told me my life didn't mean anything to her.
Yeah. And
that I would never get anything over her dead body. But throughout the years, we had mutual friends, so I always knew where she was, how she was. I knew she had died before it even got to the press. That's why I went to the hospital.
Well, that brings the next point. Now, in recent times, was there a reconciliation?
Only through third parties. I think as long as her mother was alive, that it wasn't going to happen. Because she was fighting with her mother, and she owed a lot of money, and she did get those loans that just forfeited the house, and now they're covering all that up, and they have a way of making things go away they don't want to exist. But she struggled.
Right.
She got $100,000 a month, and she died in $3 million debt. So.
Right. Well, I marked off something in your book here that I was really touched by, in a way that you consider Elvis's private daughter,
and that's what he considered me. And
Lisa was his public daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, do you really?
I do believe
that.
I do, because according to people that knew him, he accepted me and others. There's also, I'm not the only one, but there were the public children and the private children.
I see. Yeah,
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's why I marked that off in the book, because I was.
I'm glad you really read it.
Yeah, because I was trying to really. Wanted to ask you if you ever felt really good about that, or did you have your own self-resentment of having to call yourself Elvis's private daughter?
No, I'm such a spiritual being, and I believe that this isn't my first lifetime here on earth, and I believe everything works out, and that I agreed to this before I was even born. And to tell you the truth, I've seen what fame does to people, and I would much prefer my simple life.
I see.
And what I inherited, they can't take away.
That's right.
They can't take away the parts of him that are me. You can't really separate a father and child, no matter what.
Right. So, what are your future plans? Do you have another book coming out?
I do have another book coming out, and you can get this one at DEBORAHPRESLEY.com.
Okay.
And I do have another one, and then I'm hoping to do spiritual healing podcast, and just try to help, because we all need to realize that we all came from the same place. And even after what happened with Trump the other day, I feel like that we're more united now than ever, and that we need to all realize where we came from and who we really are, and to bring God back into our lives. And
well, do you feel your dad Elvis is still entertaining up there in the next world, or what?
He could be entertaining in this world, who knows? He's entertaining wherever he is, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, Deborah, I'll tell you, it's certainly been a pleasure for you being here today.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the luck with the next book. I hope we can...
I'll give you that too.
Yeah. How soon do you think that next book is coming out?
I'm moving back to North Carolina. I'm about halfway through, so hopefully by the end of the year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll look out for that book.
It'll just be Starseed 2.
Oh, Starseed Part 2. Okay. Well, very well. That's very interesting. Well, again, thank you for joining us on the show
welcome.
today.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay. And, well, hope all goes well.
It will.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And thank you.
So, folks, that is the interview.
The Sweaty Deborah.
Yeah, Sweaty Deborah. And, of course, this is her book. You can order it on the online.
Will you send it to me when you're done, and then I'll post information?
Here you go.
People are asking.
Yeah. So, that's Deborah. And you look for this book, Memoirs of a Starseed Child. Very interesting read here.
Barnes & Noble.
Barnes & Noble. In fact, she just said Barnes & Noble, so there you go. All right. Well, that's Moonlight Conversations for tonight, or today, whatever you want. And we'll see you next show.